Hey everybody, I'm David Steven Cohen. I was the head writer on Courage the Cowardly Dog. I had the pleasure of working on all 4 seasons of the show with its creator and visionary, John R. Dilworth. It's wonderful that you're here and that you're fans. I'm a fan too, and that's why I'm so tickled that Channel Frederator asked me to introduce to you 107 facts about Courage the Cowardly Dog. Let's watch this!
Since the dawn of animation, cartoons have been filled with all sorts of dogs, but one paradoxically named puppy stands out in the crowd, Courage the Cowardly Dog. We're going to take you through the horrifyingly funny animated series of everyone's favorite pink pooch, Courage. Hey, I'm Joe with Channel Frederator, and we've got all sorts of info you may not have noticed when you were too busy quivering in fear, like how Courage got his name. So prepare for some scares as we bring you 107 facts about Courage the Cowardly Dog. Ooga booga booga! Courage the Cowardly Dog was created by John R. Dilworth. Dilworth went to school at the School of Visual Arts in New York City, where he was first exposed to the world of animation. It was love at first sight. He graduated in 1985 with a bachelor's degree and started off working at Baldy, Bloom, and Wayland Advertising as an art director. Before Courage, Dilworth made several films in his spare time while he worked as an art director. After work, he would spend hours every night making what would later become The Limited Bird, a 14-minute short that John worked on for 2.5 years. This would not only be the last film John would make. After The Limited Bird, he started work on his next film, When Lily Laney Moved In. Some of Dilworth's influences include Clampett, Tex Avery, and Salvador Dali. His family would often watch other notable comedians like Charlie Chaplin, which went on to inspire some of the slapstick humor we see in Courage. Dilworth had a lot of contemporary influences as well, including Mamoru Oshii's Ghost in the Shell, although he admits it's not a narrative influence, but rather influential in terms of the dynamics of action and technology. Other inspirations included Miyazaki's Porco Rosso and My Neighbor Totoro. Dilworth admired the blend of fantasy and innocence in those films. Courage's pilot was titled The Chicken from Outer Space. The pilot was pitched to Hanna-Barbera's What a Cartoon Shorts program, headed by then-president and Frederator's own Fred Seibert. Courage aired alongside other now legendary cartoons like Powerpuff Girls, Johnny Bravo, and Cow and Chicken. Dilworth credits a lot of things for the creation of The Chicken from Outer Space, which would become Courage. He was fascinated with the idea of the American heartland and the farm myths that centered around alien abductions and other strange happenings that occur in the middle of nowhere. Dilworth always intended Courage to be a horror comedy. As a child, Dilworth and his brother would go to great lengths in scaring their mother. Keep in mind, Dilworth loved his mother, but admitted that there is just something oddly satisfying about jumping out and scaring her as she came home from work. To Dilworth, life can be terrifying, so the only way to survive it is to be as scary as life itself. Wise words to live by. The inspiration for the actual setting of Nowhere, Kansas came from the Dust Bowl. Dilworth was looking at photographs of the Dust Bowl and loved the flat, barren landscape where nothing grew, and put a single farmhouse in the middle of all that barren waste. During his time at Nickelodeon in 1992, he worked on a pilot with Jumbo Pictures called Psyched for Snup-Up. At the same time, Dilworth continued to work on his craft and formalize his design. What he gravitates towards is non-traditional colors in contrast, because to him, all colors are design, and black and white drawings are not complete, just a stage. An early version of Courage could be seen in the short Smart Talk with Raisin. The short was featured on MTV's Liquid Television in 1993 and featured a dog named Hamilton that vaguely resembles Courage. While the dog may not protect a farmhouse from alien chickens, he does attempt to do some magic tricks. With each film, Dilworth aims to be perfect in his craft. In 1994, he created his internationally acclaimed film, The Dirty Bird. It was with this film that Dilworth refined his sense of timing. He refers to a beat as something between 4 and 8 frames, and said that while working on Psyched for Snup-Up and When Lily Laney Moved In, he wasn't happy with the timing at all. The Dirty Bird helped him with that. While Courage was being produced, Dilworth created, wrote, and directed a segment for Sesame Street in 1996. It was called Noodles and Ned, which were 5-minute segments that appeared on the show. While rewarding and fulfilling for Dilworth, creating these short films led to some economic restraints. He wanted to fix that. This motivated him to pitch The Chicken from Outer Space in LA to a room full of executives. After that, well, then came Courage. When Hanna-Barbera was scouting for their What a Cartoon segment, Dilworth had originally pitched The Dirty Bird. They passed on the short, what with the butts and stuff, and Dilworth showed them the storyboard for The Chicken from Outer Space, which they seemed to like better. What inspired the space chicken? A penguin. Dilworth was inspired by Nick Park's Wallace and Gromit cartoon, Wrong Trousers, which features a mischievous penguin. He loved the penguin so much that he based his space chicken off of it. The Chicken from Outer Space was originally going to be a black and white cartoon. Dilworth wanted to pay homage to the classic 50s B horror movies. In the opening scene from The Chicken from Outer Space, we see some portraits hanging in the kitchen. The cat is of Dilworth's real cat Suavidad, who was was a very sweet lap cat at the time. In the scene where Muriel takes out the mouse, we get to see more framed pictures of real people. The photos are of the two colorists for the short. The mask Eustace used to scare Courage was originally going to be a shotgun. Thinking as an independent artist, Dilworth was going to have Eustace blast Courage with a double barrel, but of course, the network wouldn't allow a character to Ol Yeller a dog, so the mask was created instead. You can thank Hanna-Barbera development executive Ellen Cockrell for creating Eustace's iconic mask. Dilworth credits her largely for coming up with the design and concept for it. The UFO in The Chicken from Outer Space was done in CG. Back in 1995, everyone was excited about new technology, and Dilworth, always the fan of mixed media, contacted a colleague in LA who made the UFO for the short. The backgrounds in the short were done by Margaret Fry, who would later become the art director for the show when it was greenlit. She is currently helping Dilworth with his latest film, Goose in High Heels. The environment in the show wasn't just drawn. Using digital technologies available to them, the team combined CGI and texture mapping to create a sense of a realistic setting, contrasted by the use of colors. Okay, but what does that mean? All the textures, such as wood and sand, were digitized. It's subtle, but it really drives the visuals home. The entire short was voiced by one guy, Howard Hoffman, but the actual series would go on to have a full voiced cast, with Marty Grabstein voicing Courage and Thea White voicing Muriel. In the scene where Courage is looking through the window in The Chicken from Outer Space, another photo can be seen on the wall. The photo is of Dilworth's late brother, Jim. Jim was actually the one who created King Ramses. Dilworth loved a video that he saw of a dog who was CG animated but was flat like paper, so they mimicked that. The dog in question was Parappa the Rapper, a PlayStation game from 1996 about a rapping dog. While Muriel is sat at the table in The Chicken from Outer Space, you can see that she collects Dilworth character figurines, featured in the cabinet behind her. The shelves are filled with characters from Dilworth's other cartoons like The Dirty Bird. The people in the picture frames right above Muriel, well, they're Margaret Fry, background artist, and her husband, David. In the short, when Courage finally beats the chicken, he gives him a bag that says Mars on it. Originally, the bag said Albany. Dilworth explains that he and his sisters took a trip there one time, and when he was making the short, he thought, why not Albany? However, the network changed it to Mars in the next scene when the chicken pulls his gun. Dilworth hid another message in The Chicken from Outer Space. When Courage blasts Chicken Eustace, he disintegrates into ash. If you stop it frame by frame, you will see a message spelled out in the ash that says, eat me. Before the short ends, Courage stops the transition and says, this shouldn't happen to a dog, in a clear Jackie Mason impression. According to Dilworth, he just found that hysterical when he saw it in a Warner Brothers cartoon once, so he used it for the short. Classic visual sound effects are prevalent throughout Courage, and that's no exception in the original short either. Dilworth got the idea from Don Martin in Mad Magazine, who would include the visualizations of sound effects in comics and cartoons. The Chicken from Outer Space made it onto a few Hanna-Barbera products. The short was featured with a VHS copy of Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost, which came out in 1999. By 1998, Cartoon Network and Dilworth worked out an agreement for the first season of Courage the Cowardly Dog. The show would have 26 11-minute segments, or 13 half-hour episodes. To accommodate this, Stretch Films, Dilworth's animation studio, expanded, and producer Robert Winthrop was brought onto the production. Unlike storyboard-driven shows, Courage episodes were first written in script form. Most stories started with Dilworth, and then he'd bounce ideas around with the writing team, led by Emmy-winning head writer David Steven Cohen. Cohen would then guide the team in shaping the stories into little movies, overseeing the writing process through final draft script. Although Courage is a dog, he rarely walks like one. It's very rare for Courage to be seen on all fours in the series. Dilworth and the team experimented with different ways for Courage to move, and I guess they just didn't love him on all fours. An interesting part of the show is the formatting, because it involves CGI and texture mapping. Dilworth explained that they used a combination of both methods to create a sense of realism that's balanced with the color scheme. They did not simply put hand-drawn characters on a 3D surface, but rather they adjusted the colors of the characters so that they fit more with the textured sand, sky, and other assets. When directing Courage, Dilworth wanted to avoid dissolves or camera wipes if possible. His reason was that there are no cameras in real life, and in Courage, things are happening so fast that there is usually no need for them anyway. While Dilworth worked with the team to write and direct, he also provided some voices, one of which was the Nowhere Newsman, who would introduce the show at the beginning and make several appearances throughout the series. The first episode, A Night at the Cat's Motel, was pitched in a hotel in Atlanta. Dilworth was there with Cartoon Network focus testing the short. While in Atlanta, Dilworth laid out the whole 80-ish page storyboard to the VP of Original Animation, Linda Semensky, in the hallway of his hotel, and in a room nearby, kids were being shown The Chicken from Outer Space. A Night at the Cat's Motel is a parody of Psycho, where Courage plays the role of Anthony Perkins. Before Cat's Motel, Dilworth and the team drew up storyboards to discover what worked in the show. The chicken strikes again as a rubber ducky? Yes, in the bathtub scene from A Night at the Cat's Motel, you can see the chicken from The Chicken from Outer Space floating in the bathtub. Courage the Cowardly Dog had a lot of images and characters that might not often be seen in cartoons today, but Dilworth and the team had creative ways to get around standards and practices. In the first episode, the room where the bags are staying is 666 and a half to avoid the infamous 666. Not that sneaky, but it worked. While Dilworth likes to borrow tropes from classic Warner Brothers cartoons, he also drew inspiration from stuntmen too, especially Evel Knievel, who was known for his daring motorcycle stunts. Dilworth took these various influences to create Courage's transformative nature. In classic Dilworth fashion, the first episode is a menagerie of horror tropes. The idea of cats trying to feed his spiders comes right out of The Island of Dr. Moreau, a novel about an island full of vile experiments. You might be asking, but why spiders? Unlike most people, Dilworth is absolutely fascinated by them. He enjoys their otherworldly appearance and creep factor, making them the perfect monsters for his show. Like the original short, Katz prefers to beat his opponents with games rather than violence. Dilworth admits he would rather have conflicts resolved not through bullying or violence, but through games of sport. Of course, when the villain wins, he can finish his victim off with a nice dose of spider. Dilworth has a wide range of musical tastes, both contemporary and classical. For A Night at the Cat's Motel, he requested composers Jody Gray and Andy Ezrin to make a techno beat for the episode. Dilworth said he was just going through a techno phase and liked the sound of it. The overture music for King Ramses' Curse was not recorded with an Egyptian instrument or style. Despite the whole episode being centered around ancient Egyptian history, the music has far more Thai influences, as it was made with a cultural Thai instrument called a tray. When thinking up the most agonizing song for the episode, Gray and Ezrin had a bit of fun and thought the worst song would be Bad Disco. The vocals were even recorded by Gray and Ezrin themselves. If you ever want to know what the lyrics are for that horrible song, Gray has you covered. In an interview, Gray went through the one verse that is repeated for eternity. King Ramses, the man in gauze. He's no Santa Claus, the man in gauze. You're welcome. When it came to the music, Dilworth had a theme in mind depending on the situation: suspense, comedy, or action. But even in the music, he wanted it to be unique. For Courage's theme song, Gray and Ezrin composed several musical sketches for the theme song. Dilworth loved a particular section, and they expanded on that. In fact, Dilworth's favorite part of production was the music. His two favorite songs in the whole series are King Ramses and Doc Gerbil's World. The music for the show was composed by Jody Gray and Andy Ezrin. The two used classical music several times in the show as an homage to classic cartoon scores by Warner Brothers. Jody and Andy would mostly compose from scratch. Usually composers have a library of cues that they can borrow from and mix it when it comes to post-production TV music. For Courage, however, only about 10% of the scores were recycled. The way Courage was scored was often unusual and cinematic. At times, the music would play against the action, as with the romantic gothic choir underscoring the motorboat chase sequence in Human Habit Trail. This is quite unlike the typical technique called Mickey Mousing, in which every piece of music corresponds directly with the animation. Jody and Andy were not afraid to try out styles either. Through the entire show, almost all types of music were utilized, from salsa to techno and classical to Broadway. When the show was all wrapped up, the playlist was extensive to say the least. By the end of season 4, there were 104 original scores. Okay, now I definitely want that soundtrack. Come on, CN, make it happen. One song was even made by the band They Might Be Giants. In 2001, they released a song called Courage the Cowardly Dog, which played on Cartoon Network during commercial breaks. One of the most memorable episodes for fans is the Human Habit Trail, or more commonly known as Doc Gerbil's World. Someone asked Gray if the boat scene was influenced by John Woo movies. Gray said that while it was not influenced by John Woo movies, and it was instead their practice of scoring against the action, he did mention that the song Doc Gerbil's World is a reference to It's a Small World. When it came time to pick out sounds for the show, Dilworth did not want to use stock sound effects. He contributed a lot of new sound effects and gave it to the show's sound designer, Michael Greisler, and only selected samples that made him laugh. Eustace has actually been played by 3 people. Lionel Wilson, the original voice of Eustace, passed away in 2003, so the role was taken over by Arthur Anderson. For the Fog of Courage special, Eustace was played by Wallace Shawn from The Princess Bride and Toy Story. Dilworth modeled Muriel Bagg after a real Scottish Muriel he knew. Thea White, the voice of Muriel, was given some guidelines, but really made the character her own. Dilworth's go-to voice actors for supplementary roles are Peter Fernandez and Paul Scheffler. The two are described as Dilworth's Mel Blanc of Courage, providing a slew of voices for villains and background characters, including the villain's Rodney Robot. Dilworth thought Marty was the perfect choice for Courage because of his vocalization, and according to Dilworth, Marty's eyebrows would go up in the same direction that Courage's did. Dilworth wanted a familiar theme for the farm that matched its aesthetic. The familiar overture of the farm at the end of some episodes was meant to give it the feel of Middle America at the end of the Dust Bowl era. Paul Scheffler created Katz's voice by impersonating John Hillerman from Magnum P.I. Before casting, Dilworth usually sat down and considered what the villains would sound like and tried to explain that to his voice actors. Usually, he wanted a very animated voice, so to Dilworth, using John Hillerman as an influence was perfect since he felt the actor sounded so much like the cartoon character already. If you've seen Dilworth's shorts, you might recognize Katz from one of his earlier films, because Katz is a deviation from Fergarina, the cat from The Dirty Birdie. In all of Dilworth's films, there is one underlying theme: compassion. Dilworth explained, "Compassion is very good, to be able to identify with any character or thing. You know, a rock could be compassionate, I guess. Even by being so non-objective, it's just a rock. But when it rains on it, it gets flooded. It just stays there." Some things that Dilworth learned from working on Courage are patience and greater tolerance. In his mind, there is nothing on earth you are going to accomplish if you don't get along with others. That is a very valuable lesson. No one wants to work with a diva. Ever wonder why Courage morphs into strange things when he babbles to explain something? Dilworth modeled that after Charlie Chaplin's exaggerated gestures and speechless emotions. Out of all the villains in the show, Dilworth's favorite is Katz because he was the first villain. However, he is also fond of Freaky Fred, who was thought up by Dilworth and series head writer David Steven Cohen. Freaky Fred came from Dilworth's desire to make an episode that rhymed like a twisted Dr. Seuss, and Cohen is an experienced versifier and lyricist, so the team developed this story. Cohen penned the script with screenwriter Bill Marsilli. The Powerpuff Girls make a brief appearance in Courage the Cowardly Dog. Well, sort of. A poster for the show appears in the episode The Ride of the Valkyries. While the show features a lot of well-known original songs, an official soundtrack has never been made. Jody Gray and Andy Ezrin have been working with Cartoon Network for decades on it, but the green light just never comes through. Of course, you can find a 10-hour-long version of Doc Gerbil's World on YouTube, so hey, that's good enough, right? At least for now. Of all the episodes in the show, Dilworth was surprised that Mask made it through. The episode deals with a lot of mature subjects such as abusive relationships and possible homosexual relationships, though Dilworth has kept that up to interpretation. When asked about it, he recalled that he was personally going through when he made each of these episodes. Another episode Dilworth was fond of was Last of the Star Makers. It reminded him of the Dali painting The Metamorphosis of Narcissus and the idea that death brings new life. One of the most common pieces of misinformation about Courage is that Ringo Starr did a voice for the episode Duck Brothers, despite Ringo not being credited on the episode's IMDb page. Dilworth put this to bed, saying that the rumor was just put in for titillation, and the real voice actor behind the Duck Brothers was Will Ryan. Additionally, their singing voices were provided by Will Ryan and David Steven Cohen. Ringo Starr did not do any voices for Courage. Although Nowhere, Kansas doesn't exist, there is a community in Oklahoma called Nowhere. Maybe in that town, there's a Scottish family with a pink dog. The episode King Ramsay's Curse is one of the few episodes where Courage has any lines. Dilworth explained that after about 6 or so episodes, Mike Lazo, the VP of programming at Cartoon Network, he suggested that Courage should not speak, and his speech should be limited to screams, babbling, and whines. Dilworth agreed because in The Chicken from Outer Space, Courage did not speak. Did you know that Muriel plays the sitar? For those who don't know what a sitar is, it's a plucked string instrument typically used in Hindu Nasti and Indian music. They are incredibly complex and have anywhere from 18 to 21 strings. That may seem like a very random instrument choice for a Scottish woman in Kansas, but Muriel plays the sitar in honor of Linda Semensky. Semensky was Dilworth's champion of Courage at Cartoon Network and also happens to play the sitar in real life. So as a thank you to her, he had Muriel play it as well. And whenever you hear Muriel play the sitar, it's actually Linda Semensky playing it. There are a lot of fan theories surrounding Courage. One popular theory is that Nowhere is actually purgatory. Dilworth loves them. He says that all of them are correct, and he refuses to be that person who says a theory is incorrect. Another popular fan theory is that all of the villains in the series are nothing more than humans seen through Courage's warped dog senses. The theory argues that Courage actually lives on a normal farm. He only thinks it's in the middle of nowhere because his owners are too old and apathetic to walk him, so he simply doesn't know what's outside. Sound familiar? Then you've probably watched our cartoon conspiracy about it. Dilworth said he gets that theory a lot and embraces the fans' interpretation of his show because he enjoys seeing people come to different conclusions about Courage. He also said that they are all correct because his show is art and art is open for interpretation. Now please excuse us while we go back and confirm our own cartoon conspiracy. The names Muriel and Eustace are taken from the middle names of other famous TV characters, Chandler Bing and Ross Geller. I never would have pinned Dilworth as a Friends guy, but I guess everybody really did love that show. Courage got his ironic name when Muriel found him as a puppy alone in an alley, thinking that the dog had to be brave to be there all alone. You can see this in the episode titled Remembrance of Courage Past. The living room of the farmhouse changes throughout the series. In one episode, we see it with a mounted moose head and a fireplace, and in another episode, they're both gone. Guess they like to redecorate. Eustace's truck looks very similar to a Chevrolet 1.5 ton, which was a common truck used by farmers in the Midwest of the United States back in the day. Dilworth never faced backlash from Cartoon Network about story premises, which is actually pretty amazing. Courage really pushed the boundaries of horror for our Cartoon Network show, but Dilworth and his crew knew not to write any story that wouldn't make it to air, so they made every premise Dilworth wanted with CN's blessing. The only production pollution problem the team ran into was a concern over the color of indigenous islanders on Courage Under the Volcano, so they made them a skin tone that doesn't exist, purple. Zalost translates to sadness in Croatian, so it should come as no surprise that Zalost was created while Dilworth was in Zagreb, Croatia. But the Croatian influence didn't stop there. Dr. Zalost's tower is also modeled after the old tower in Zagreb, Croatia. Courage's computer, bluntly named Computer, was inspired by HAL 9000 in Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey. Computer was created to be a lame version of HAL, and needless to say, they succeeded. Muriel has quite a unique blood type, so stand aside, AB negatives. Our kind old lady is ABZYX? You heard that right, ABZYX. Anything is possible in cartoons. Either that or Muriel is secretly an alien. D-Lung and his famous catchphrase, "What were you doing, you fool?" was inspired by Courage's design director, Tim Chi Lee. One day, out of the blue, Dilworth asked him if he wanted to voice a character, and D-Lung was born from Lee's natural way of speaking. When creating his stories, Dilworth always followed a thematic formula of having 3 central characters. The first would be female of higher intelligence, who was off in some way. Then, an unsympathetic male character. And finally, there would be an innocent character. Of course, Courage perfectly fits into this formula. Deep down, Dilworth always knew this show was going to be about an elderly couple and a dog. Courage has won its fair share of awards. The original short, The Chicken from Outer Space, was nominated for an Academy Award in 1996. Dilworth also received an Annie Award in 2000 for Outstanding Individual Achievement for Production Design in an Animated Television Production for the episode A Night at the Cat's Motel. Courage was cancelled because Dilworth and his team had fulfilled their contract after the 4th season. They could have continued on with the 5th and 6th season, but by that point, a lot had changed. New management came in and things never really got pushed through for Courage to continue. However, Courage made a return in a brand new way. In 2014, the beloved dog turned for a short film titled The Fog of Courage, which featured most of the original voice cast, with the exception of Eustace, who was voiced by Wallace Shawn. In 2010, Courage the Cowardly Dog was re-released as part of the Cartoon Network Hall of Fame DVD collection. All 13 episodes of Season 1 were released in 2010, followed by a Season 2 in 2014 and Seasons 3 and 4 in 2016. While Courage did not have an official video game, he has made several cameos in CN games like Cartoon Network Racing. In the PS2 version of the game, you can even unlock cartoons, 2 of which are episodes Robot Randy and The Magic Tree of Nowhere. With social media now being a huge platform for petitions and causes, a Facebook group titled The Courage the Cowardly Dog Revival Campaign was started in July 2016. It has remained pretty active, so go and give it a like if you want. If you want to see more John Dilworth, you can find him on YouTube on his channel Stretch Films, named after his studio. He posts random vlogs, animations, and other wacky things you would expect from him. Since Courage's cancellation, Dilworth has been making small art films in Spain like Rinky Dink and The Dirty Bird Redux. For the sequel to his Dirty Bird film, Dilworth added an extra minute of animation that, in his view, completely changed the Dirty Bird character. In addition to filmmaking, Dilworth has also lectured on animation at multiple colleges and other venues, including his alma mater, the School of Visual Arts in New York. The word Dill is hidden throughout the show, and sometimes multiple times in an episode, such as in the pilot. It's short for Dilworth, of course. We like to think of it as sort of a hidden signature throughout. There are even moments when you can find Dilly Says posters, followed by a simple life suggestion, such as read a book. While the show may be over, Andy Ezrin and Jody Gray are still collaborating with Dilworth. In 2009, at an ASIFA East End School of Visual Arts event, there was a screening of Dilworth's new short Rinky Dink, which featured original music by Jody Gray. Once again, I'm Joe, and thanks for watching 107 Facts About Courage the Cowardly Dog. Which episode was your favorite? Which song? Comment below and let us know. And don't forget to click that bell icon to become part of the notification squad. We have new videos dropping every week, so be sure to subscribe to Channel Frederator, your cartoon central on the internet.